Hello everyone, it's Scott and we're back with Monday's Final Fantasy previews. We got just a few cards to talk about today, but I think they're cards that are definitely playable in Standard. So before we do, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Final Fantasy preview season and beyond. And if you're looking for cards from the set, check us out on the web at caffeinatedgamers.tcgplayerpro.com. Alright, so let's dive into today's previews. The first is Lindblum Industrial Regency. You get a land that's a town. Okay, it has Mage Siege for its adventure for 2 and a red mana. You get an instant, and you get to create a 0/1 Black Wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell. This token deals 1 damage to each opponent. So really nice ability there on this. So in the late game, when you maybe don't need a land, you can create the 1/1 Black Wizard creature token that deals damage to your opponent just for you playing the game. And then earlier in the game, when you need the land, you can play it as a land. It enters tapped, and you get red mana for it. So I think this is definitely a playable card in Standard. Now, is it going to be a 4 of index? I don't think so, but it's certainly a card that in the mid to late game, when you're just trying to get another creature onto the field that will help win the game, I think this is a good card for that purpose. Next, we've got Titus Blitzball Star for 1, a white, and a blue mana. You leisure a creature that's a human warrior and is a 2/1. And whenever an artifact you control enters, put a +1/+1 counter on Titus. And whenever Titus attacks, tap target creature an opponent controls. So I think this easily slots into our Azorius artifact deck around Simulacrum Synthesizer, because that's going to be adding, obviously, lots of artifacts over the course of the game to the battlefield. But it could also fit into an Equipment Matters deck, or any deck that's creating tokens that are artifacts like map tokens. And because of that, I think Titus has a number of different spots in Standard where he can slot in and be a good creature, and that ability to tap something down when he's attacking. I don't undersell that as an important ability, because you can take their best creature out of combat, and that may be the difference between winning and losing some games. Next, we've got Adalbert Steiner for 1 and a white mana. You can legendary creature that's a human knight and is a 2/1 with lifelink. And Albert Steiner gets +1/+1 for each equipment you control. So obviously, Adalbert is intended to go into our equipment deck and is a nice payoff for playing that deck. So you're going to gain life, and for each of those equipments, he's going to get +1/+1. So in the mid to late game, he's easily 7, 8 power if you played a bunch of low cost equipment spells throughout the course of the game. Next, we've got a side quest, Play Blitzball for 2 and a red mana. You get an enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And at the end of combat on your turn, if a player was dealt 6 or more combat damage this turn, transform this enchantment, then attach it to a creature you control. And then you get World Champion Celestial Weapon, which is a legendary artifact equipment, and you get double Overdrive. Equip creature gets +2/+0 and has double strike, and equip cost is 3. So I think this is playable in Standard. Again, the question is where exactly this would fit. Mono red might have some interest in it, simply because you get that double strike ability, but because of the creatures that we already have at that 3-drop spot, I'm not sure that it's going to want it that much. And maybe the better place for this is going to be in the equipment deck, because ultimately this is going to be common equipment that gives a creature double strike. Next, we have Haste Magic for 1 and a red mana. You get an instant. Target creature gets +3/+1 and gains haste until end of turn. And then you get to exile the top card of your library, and you may play it until your next end step. So I really like this card. I think in the Ley Line of Resonance decks, this actually might be a spell that deck would want. And the reason is it would give your Manifold Mouse haste, or your Heartfire Hero haste. But more importantly, it's going to exile that card and give you another card to play. Because one of the problems that deck can have at times is it runs out of cards and your opponent's been able to kill everything. And just getting an additional card could matter significantly for that deck. So I think this has some standard playability. Next, we've got Queen Brahmin for 2 and a red mana. You get a legendary creature. That's a human noble and is a 2/1 with prowess. And whenever Queen Brahmin attacks, create a 0/1 black wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. So I think this is definitely standard playable. 3 mana for this, it would be better if it was 2, but being able to attack with it and then create that 0/1 black wizard creature token, I think that's good enough for it to see a little bit of standard play. It's not going to be 4 of it in any deck, but maybe a couple copies of it in the sideboard or in the main deck might make sense in, say, the Is It Prowess deck, because it's going to be a way of creating something that's going to, help facilitate the game plan, which is playing a lot of, low cost spells. And every time you do that, if you've got the wizard token on the field, then it's going to deal damage to your opponent. And I think that's good enough to see potentially standard play. All right, moving on to Syncopate for X and a blue mana. You get an instant and counter target spell unless its controller pays X. If that spell is countered this way, exile instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. And this is a reprint. And Syncopate, depending on the format, has always been a good card in Standard, so I would think that it would be again. Next, we've got Coral Sword for a red mana. You get an artifact equipment with flash, and when this equipment enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains first strike until end of turn. An equipped creature gets +1/+0. So I like this as a combat trick for red decks, where you're giving them that first strike ability on the turn it comes into play. And you can flash this during combat or flash it on your opponent's turn. So I think there's definite ways to see this will see play in Standard. The question is what deck's going to want it. And our last card of the day is Blitzball Shot for 1 and a green mana. You get an instant and target creature gets +3/+3 and gains trample until end of turn. Again, in limited, this will be a good card. It's possible that our green decks might want this, but right now we do have better 2 mana spells that give something +3/+3, and they give him things like Indestructible. So I think this is going to have to wait a little bit to see play in Standard, but certainly has an opportunity, maybe in our Girl Prowess deck, to get that extra little bit of damage in. So I think that has some Standard playability in that area. All right, so those were our previews for Monday, and we'll be back tomorrow with another preview video to look at the latest Final Fantasy cards. Thank you for staying to the end of the video. I've left a link to our complete Final Fantasy playlist here, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks.